Oftentimes we take it for granted, this thing called being a human being, because we do have certain infrastructure, if you will, to begin with, that we don't need to have it be, using a computer term, be installed. Sometimes it's called conscience and empathy. Of course, as a young child growing up, if your surrounding, if your the influences that you are exposed to as a child growing up, those critical times, I'm talking about like a few months old infant, if they are supporting or not, that will have an impact on the development or be detrimental to one's own moral development, if you will. Whether the child becomes empathetic or apathetic, lacking in empathy. Being more like an automaton, or becoming very self-centered. One's happiness stemming from what's in it for me only. Something that you would see in certain communities or parts of human history, such as in communist Soviet Union or communist China, or anywhere where individuals were forced to implode, to go in and try to secure for themselves things that were scarce or not available, and to protect it at all costs. At all costs, even doing atrocious things. So the last thing you'll find in such an environment is empathy, where the immoral structure becomes the norm. You still see it in the countries that used to be part of the communist regime, whether it's in the Soviet part or in China or any other places where they have had similar fascist or indoctrinations like that, where the individual did not have the ability to say, wait a minute, I'm going to go against the stream, I'm going to go and what is this action doing to my neighbor, to my fellow human being? That my fellow human being sensibility is quite important to have in order for us to build a healthy society. This sense of my fellow human being allows us to also open up to my fellow beings, not just human. So you have this humility and love, sense of consistent flowing empathetic range that constantly expands. This is foundationally there. The rough elements of it are there. So all the child needs is to be exposed to some elements that promote that. Now today we are being taught as a society all around the world to move away from this, to become more like automatons, part of a system that is dictated by whatever the mainstream is, whatever the dominant narrative is. You are forced to follow along. Well, guess what the communists or fascists or any of those destructive movements in human history had done? You read it, I read about it in history books, and we were taught that these are bad, these are bad. Well, it's not the word communist or fascist that is the problem. It is what it represents. That's the problem. And today we have the same thing as you had in communist regimes, but manicured on the outside. The terms are different. Where you are outnumbered, and all that you were to develop into as an individual, as a human being, as part of life, is being stifled. Our wings are being clipped. Meanwhile, on the side, data is being promoted. AI is being promoted. Fancy language is being tossed around. And these are, by the way, part of that manicure part I mentioned, of how the terms are different, but it's becoming more and more Orwellian, if not already turned into one. Today we have new mandates where things that would have otherwise been simply, to put it mildly, unhealthy, they're becoming legally ratified, legally substantiated, if you will. And people are being encouraged to. For example, take drugs. In my trips in Europe, I saw one time an individual, of a middle-aged individual, a woman, standing in front of a vending machine that was dispensing for her marijuana in the middle of the street. You have states that recently, I think it's become like almost 50 states in the Union. I don't believe so, but it's going in that direction, where the fabric of society is being altered completely. And with the inundation of constant new data, the person doesn't have time to sit down and process the data coming in to just verify whether this is true or not, whether this is truly beneficial to me, for my family or not. Parents don't have control over what's going into the mind of their children, which is exceedingly dangerous. And this is something that's been going on for decades, but today, in the 21st century, it has reached ridiculous heights, levels, I would say. ridiculous levels. Meanwhile, on the side, we have promoters talking about AI and how great it is and how it's going to be a revolution. And people who promote AI, one particular individual that comes to mind, like Elon Musk, and not just him, obviously, everybody who is on that level of wealth and influence, don't seem to get that there's a far deeper aspect of being human than processing or gathering of information. Remember what I was saying about that foundation in a child that has the rough material for the child to become empathetic, socially conscious, ecologically aware, spiritually connected? That has to do with relationships. That has to do with the relatedness. And the ability to read contextually. So it's context reading ability that goes far beyond the obvious words. It is experiential. Not a matter of zeros and ones. That is what AI is based on. Perhaps one day AI might develop the ability to relate, but it will be something that is going to have to be inputted in its system. An algorithm that has to be uploaded, downloaded, coded in, etc., etc. So what I'm trying to say is that data is not wisdom. Data can never be wisdom, because in order for wisdom to take place, there needs to be, at the very least, a mind that has the capacity to understand the relationship between things based on hardcore experience. So it's experiential. And it's very individual based. Now, of course, we're at a point in our history on this planet that AI, already it's happened and it's ongoing, but it's just a matter of how much is being exposed, how much is being told to the public, etc. And, they're around anyhow. Your phone, your computer, the internet, there's AI there. That's how you're able to suddenly see something that you looked at a few seconds ago pop up in front of you on the screen when someone's selling you something, simply because you mentioned it on the phone through your friend. And there it is. Now, Google is showing you, or Amazon is showing you, or whatever, that same item, trying to sell you something. So we've passed beyond the point of being invaded. This is what happens also when experts, so-called experts like psychologists, people who study consciousness, computer science, technology, robotics, all these, when they come together, lacking morals, underline, lacking morals, and they allow whatever pops into their heads to just unfold, to materialize, irresponsibly. And then these same individuals will start seeing the impact of these within their own lifetime, in the lives of their own children, in their behavior, and especially in their grandkids, and society at large. And we cannot disassociate ourselves from that and saying, well, if I didn't do it, somebody else would have. An empathic person cannot say those words, because they hold themselves to a higher standard. So the very characteristics that AI has, the coldness and all that, which is, and if it's showing, manifesting warmth, it is being taught, it is being uploaded, coded in. Because AI doesn't know or appreciate pain, by the way. Depression. It doesn't know what that is. It doesn't know dukkha. And therefore, it cannot have insights. It can mimic. It can come across as having these things. Because I'm sure somebody's going to come up later on and say, well, can AI attain Nibbana? Well, leave the AI aside for a second. Can a human being experience Nibbana if they don't have an understanding and appreciation of dukkha, of pain, of suffering? If they get to understand that they are ignorant to begin with. So you have basically ignorant people promoting ignorance with fancy terms like AI. Oh, I'm going to send people, or colonies I'm going to build on Mars, when the work that we're doing on this planet is creating havoc, destroying this planet. So it's so backwards, it's so demented, that individuals are thinking of going off-world, spending countless amounts of money to go and establish life on a lifeless planet, when they are already here on a planet that has life that we are deliberately destroying. This is what happens when ethics is not being used as one's own compass, and greed is. Greed. Greed is the thing that is trying to promote. Greed, anger, hatred, trying to have control over others is a combination of greed, hatred or anger, and delusion. Because I am choosing to keep myself deluded of your pain. If Elon Musk could spend 1/100th of the wealth that he's spending on sending people to Mars or something, or working in that direction, and promoting a ecologically aware and conscious effort to address the issues that are going on in, let's say, Yemen, where countless people have died and are continuing to starve today in the 21st century, when people are ecstatic that they're driving a car without driving it. On the streets of Los Angeles and other places in the world, people are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a car that is driverless. Oh, I'm going to work without having to drive and steer. I get in my car drives me to work while I'm checking my email. And that is the apex at the moment of how people are viewing success and moving out of dark ages, if you will. It's extremely sad because these individuals lack responsibility. Simply because a person has vision, so-called quote-unquote vision of a future, of a technologically advanced future, does not necessarily mean that they are having the good intentions in mind. It is greed that's driving us. Same thing happens with Amazon, same thing with, these people, with Microsoft, Bill Gates, and then his own pharmaceutical connections, all these things. These people, just within a matter of a year, less than a year in fact, they doubled, probably quadrupled their wealth. Jeff Bezos is, I think I read somewhere, that he's the closest person to becoming a trillionaire. Now, it's mind-boggling how greed can blind a person. That's why the Buddha always insisted on us having to look and see how much lust, greed, basically, hatred or anger, and delusion are in one's heart. That is the quotient. That is the important factor to always be coming to look at, instead of a person's bank account, or how many jets they have, private jets, or how much influence can they have on a population, like if you're a leader of a country. How tightly can you control the business market or, financial institutions? How many people can blindly and slavishly follow what you're writing on Newsweek or CNN or, I don't know, BBC or whatever, foreign? Because that has become the criterion by which people have neglected that foundation that I was referring to, discussing earlier about a child. Because I don't believe these individuals, these beings, started with that baseline of greed, hatred, and delusion, as much as they've allowed themselves to go crazy with it, because they simply did not have any reins on it, any restrictions on, okay, there's a limit of how much I can allow my ambitions to take over the path in my life. And no, my constant blind belief in the benefits of technology, they can never outweigh the impact that this greed of mine, the damage that this greed could impact the world around me, including my co-workers, the world, the planet, all these industrial complexes. When they work and build these things, well, there's a residual impact. There's at the very least the side effects of it, just like when you take a drug and medication. There's side effects to it. There's a destruction. They're wiping up an area and building new factories, for example. It needs different substances, different material. Okay, not all of it is going into the car of a Tesla, for example. All that other stuff is going back to nature, into the soil. The chemicals and all that, it's damaging. That area, they had to cut down trees. I'm giving you a very benign aspect of the influence, the negative impact. For our intents and purposes, in sharing these thoughts today is primarily on AI and our responsibility. Responsibility not because of fear that somebody else might come and get me if I do this, if I go ahead with this, if I don't pay him off enough money, etc. Where is my own moral compass in all of this? Because AI itself, yes, it will happen, but it also is going to have a stamping of me. My own moral and ethical values, whether I like it or know about it or not, are going to be chiseled, if you will, onto this AI system. There's elements of Michelangelo in David, in the statue of David, or Moses, or Pietà. Same goes with any of the work, Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci. If you go and see The Last Supper, there's elements of his personality there, locked in. You don't have to meet Michelangelo in person. So these individuals who design these protocols, these machines, that some of them are even calling them conscious, artificial intelligence. Artificial. How can it be intelligent if it's artificial? Well, it can think on its own. Well, using what? Things that I have given it. So it becomes compounded. It builds, and it's a new product that's coming out. It will take this, it will take that, and it will make permutations of that. Okay. But what I'm giving it is extremely important as well. So this way, the scientist or the individual working on this technology needs to have some moral value so that this machine doesn't end up killing his own grandchildren one day. Years ago, there was a talk show on the radio, and I called in. I was a layman then in Los Angeles, and that was the governor, ex-governor of California. He had a program on KPFK. It was so you can call in, and he was talking about technology. He was talking about nuclear weapons, all these things, and scientists. And I was quite naive. I called in, and by some surprise I got through, and I asked the question, don't these scientists have any ethical or moral sensibility? I mean, don't they have any care and love for their own children, that they go ahead and still build new weapons? Because whoever we consider to be our enemies, they're also doing the same thing. Okay? So it's not going to be a situation where one person wins. It's a zero-sum game, people have called it, because both sides, or if there's more than two sides, all sides are going to lose because the technology is so vastly superior than what they were in the past. So it's a matter of how many times they can blow up this planet. But destroy it nevertheless. It's now a matter of multiplying the destruction. But it only takes one destruction. So these people, don't they think about? And my question was just like treated like, it wasn't even addressed, because there was a scientist on the being interviewed by this host, radio host. So it's sad that today we're at a point where AI has become part of our language, the words we use, and it's become so neutralized. It doesn't. In fact, it's something cool, but the ramification of which are not being addressed, talked about. Whatever is talked about a lot, automatically the brain is saying, well, it's okay then, now everybody accepts it, so it should be, if I don't accept it, then I'm not part of the group. Aha. That's the danger of collectivistic society, which is what communism and fascism are, which, by the way, we're living in it in modern societies, whether it's you're in the United States, Italy, Australia, all these developed, so-called developed countries. We've gone backwards. And the individual doesn't have a voice, pretty much. And if you do, you're ostracized. Somehow you're dealt with in different ways. At the very least, you're silenced by the noise of the crowd. And that crowd can only come from a space, a place where their moral compass is completely off whack. And that is what I'm trying to address here. So you can substitute the word AI with humanity easily. You can substitute it with biodiversity. You can talk about it in the form of Gaia or Earth, Mother Earth, and our responsibility. Even though I started wanting to talk about AI and our responsibility. Key word is our responsibility. And that cannot take place unless there is a moral, foundationally ethical, which, by the way, far supersedes legality. So legal is not necessarily ethical nor right. Legal, whatever is legal today, could be illegal tomorrow. Women didn't have the right to vote, and that was legal. Slavery was legal. Not allowing a certain population of the planet or a population to own, like minorities could not own property in the United States in the 20th century. Imagine that. These things were legal. People had to fight them to change the legality, the legislature, so that they could actually start buying. And these were people who had lived here, born here. So we need to be very careful in how we interpret our current social developments. If we are to survive on this planet with safety, with decency and respect for the planet and each other, and not put so much reliance on the technologies that we can come up with. Well, where is the technology coming from? If inside I'm completely devoid of any decency and moral understanding, ethical appreciation, well, what do you think the product that I'm making is going to have? So that is my encouragement to Elon Musk and the likes of him, to first focus on that. Set up an actual department in your manufacturing, factories, whatever, that dedicates considerable amount of resources to, okay, let's look at the ethical aspect. How can I make an ethical AI? I don't know. I'm just throwing this out there. Because that will surely be a step above of everyone else who's just being led by their greed. So it's a very personal path. Elon Musk and everyone, including myself, you, everybody, we're here today, gone tomorrow. The impact our work will have onto the planet and society is extremely important. One that needs to be addressed now, while we are alive. So that is how I would address AI and our responsibility. So I hope this helps.